Welcome to the Killer Author Club. 3 best-selling authors talking about killing, of the fictional kind, with the best thriller and suspense authors in the business. Killer conversations, killer cocktails, and killer guests, with your hosts, Kimberly Bell, Heather Gutenkopf, and Kara Ruda. This is the Killer Author Club.
Hello, and welcome to the Killer Author Club, your favorite haunt for all things murder, mystery, and mayhem. We are so excited to have the most hilarious and talented Sally Hepworth here in the Killer Author Club hot seat to tell us about her latest, Mad Mabel. Will she survive? Will we? We have tons of questions and heaps of killer fun plans, so buckle up and get ready to kill the lights. I'm Killer Kimberly Bell.
I'm Killer Sally.
I'm Killer Heather Gutenkopf.
And I'm Killer Kara Ruda.
Does she know her name?
I don't know where it got stuck. It just got stuck. Okay.
Before we dive into Mad Mabel, a couple of quick PSAs. Tonight's show will be available this Friday as a podcast with bonus content just for you listeners. Find the links at killerauthorclub.com. And while you're there, sign up for our newsletter so you're the very first to hear all of our killer breaking news. So now, Heather, would you please introduce our killer guest?
I would love to. Sally Hepworth is the New York Times bestselling author of 10 novels, most recently Mad Mabel. Sally's novels have been called darkly charming and praised by authors Emily Giffin and Liane Moriarty as totally absorbing and fiction at its finest. Sally's novels have sold millions of copies worldwide and have been translated into over 30 languages. Sally lives in Melbourne, Australia with her family. So now, Sally, would you please give us an elevator pitch of what Mad Mabel is all about?
I sure will. Thank you for having me. Mad Mabel is about an 81-year-old woman who lives in a really little suburban street in Melbourne, Australia. And she's a bit of a recluse. She's a bit of a curmudgeon. She kind of keeps to herself until she notices that her next door neighbor and nemesis, Ishan, hasn't been seen for a few days, and his yappy little dog is just barking. And she thinks she's going to have to go and find out what's going on. So she climbs the back fence because she's an agile 81-year-old. She goes looking and she finds that he is dead. And once the police come to explore and find out what was going on and how he died, he was 93, so it's not particularly suspicious. It comes out that she was known in her previous life as Mad Mabel because she was the youngest person ever to be convicted of murder in Australia at the age of 15. So suddenly everyone's interested in her, people know who she is, and we go back in time to find out her story, what actually happened, who she murdered, and is she actually mad? So this is Mabel's story.
So good. We loved it. We loved it. Readers, get chatty. Drop your questions for our killer guest in the comments. But first, Kara, what are we drinking?
We are drinking a murderous margarita tonight. Sally, can you please tell us why you've chosen this as your drink?
I have chosen the murderous margarita because I'm currently in Mexico. I live in Australia. Some people were confused by this, but I'm in Mexico having a little holiday before I start tour, and what could be more Mexican than a margarita?
Amazing. I'm jealous of that margarita.
Yeah, me too. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. All right. So the Killers and I created the Killer Author Club so readers like you could get up close and personal with your favorite thriller writers. Our upcoming lineup is stacked with some amazing killers: Alison Wynne Scotch, Lauren Oliver, Alex Finley, and so many more. For dates, times, past episodes, and our Killer 2026 lineup, surf to killerauthorclub.com. But tonight, it's all about Miss Mabel. Here's what some of Sally's early reviewers have had to say about the book. Library Journal gave it a starred review, a must purchase for most collections. Not only will Hepworth's many fans be clamoring for this, but it's sure to grow her reader base. And from Booklist, another starred review. Hepworth balances heartbreak with Elsie's delicious snark and strong suspense, but readers will be hard-pressed to resist feeling something here as allies emerge to defend Elsie's resigned loneliness. Arguably Hepworth's best. This is a must-read for fans. So Sally, we all know you are a very talented and highly professional killer. And now we need to know your answer to the killer question. When do you kill?
Honestly, this was a hard one because I pretty much want to kill all the time. Like, it doesn't take much. And I think it might be because I'm perimenopausal. So if I link that all together, I probably kill when I'm not taking my HRT. You know, I'm not like slathering it on like, you know, lotion of a morning. Someone's going to die by that evening, I would say.
I love it. And I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Completely.
It keeps everyone safe. It keeps us out of jail. It keeps them safe.
Yeah, no
Get a
kidding.
sponsor.
No kidding. Take your pills, ladies.
That's right.
So the premise of this one rests on something I think I've heard you say yourself, that nobody ever suspects little girls or old ladies of murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that blind spot and how much fun did you have exploring this one?
So much fun. And it actually, that idea was given to me by a little old lady. How good is that? So I was at a event in Australia. My previous book, Darling Girls, was out and I was touring, and I'd just done a talk and it was all about crime and killers and murder. And, you know, I was really getting into it. I was trying to get ideas for how I could murder people. And at the end I was signing books and a woman was there and she was 93 and she was there with her daughter and her granddaughter, and she was in the line. She was quite elderly and I kept saying, send her up, you know, she can come to the front. And she, you know, said, no, I'm happy to wait. And she got to the end of that line and she pulled up a seat. And I thought, we've got a bit of, you know, something's going to happen. And she said, I'm thinking of murdering my next door neighbor. And I said, fantastic. How are you going to do it?
Tell me everything.
Yeah. And she said, well, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I know that I'm going to get away with it. I thought, this is brilliant. How do you know? And she said, because there are two groups of people who are never suspected of murder, and one is old ladies and the other are little girls. And I thought that is the premise of my next book. And, you know, it doesn't, as you guys know, it doesn't always happen that way, but it was like it was just given to me out of the, you know, from the gods or something. And then, you know, and from there, of course, like you kind of have that lightning bolt, but the development of Mabel, Elsie, as she's known in the book, really came about from just researching what the kind of people, what happens when a young person kills. And it's very unusual, as we know, and it's even more unusual when a young person is female. And so there weren't many cases of it. There was the case of Mary Bell in the UK, and she was a little girl who murdered, I think, by the age of 10. And there was also a case of two little girls in New Zealand who were 15 and they murdered one of the girls' mothers. And that case was made into a movie with Kate Winslet called Heavenly Creatures. I don't know if you guys know that story, but one of the ladies, Juliet Hume, turned out to be Anne Perry, the crime writer. So that story in itself is fascinating. But what I found is that anyone who kills as a child has had terrible things happen to them. So that's what I wanted to explore in this book. So we've got an old woman who has murdered as a little girl. What's the why? Because we already know that she has killed at the beginning of the book. Why did this happen? And that allowed me to go back into the 1950s where she grew up and to explore what led her there. And so that kind of became the book for me.
Well, so the tagline on the book is they called it murder, she called it justice. So did you have that tagline in mind when you started writing, or did that come as you got to know Mabel and the story? How did
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
it came at the end. I don't really know what the taglines are going to be, or even what the title is going to be as I write. I was hoping it would be Mad Mabel. That's what I was calling it as a working title, but I apparently am really shit at working titles because
Me
they rarely
too.
make it through or
They're
actual.
so hard.
They're so hard. And in fact, it was then my editor, without any prompting, said, I think we should call it Mad Mabel. And I was like, yes.
What?
So no, I didn't know that would be the tagline. I didn't really know what was going to be the wisdom, as it were. I'm not sure, honestly, I'm not sure that there really is wisdom other than, on a really general level of we should always try to understand people better and we should always be empathetic. I don't have a lot of wisdom.
Yes, you do.
Well, what I have, I think, is an interest in people, like all of us, and a desire to understand why people do what they do. And I'm a bit of a natural empath in that I find it really hard to write someone up as being plain old evil. I tend to want to understand them, as we all do. That's what how boring would our books be if things were black and white? But I knew that this character had to be, a character that we wanted to root for, but not a straight up kind of sweet old lady. And I had so much fun. She kind of, was fully formed for me. And by page 3, she was telling this little 7-year-old girl to fuck off, which I thought, gee, that's not, I hope people go there with this old lady, because it's not like your classic sweet little old lady. You have to sort of go on this journey with her. But what I found, because it has been out for a few months in Australia, is that people did, I think they appreciated her from the start with all of her foibles and all of her funny, crotchety little ways.
She's
and more
so
importantly,
snarky and funny. She's
Yeah.
And I think the bit about the nobody suspects little old ladies and little girl or children is also people can handle more from a character when they're old or when they're really young, right?
That's true. That is true. And I think the other piece, of course, is that she was young when she murdered, which is why old women and little girls, but she also is befriended by the little girl who lives across the road, whose name is Persephone. And the way that Persephone sort of wangles her way into Elsie Mabel's life is something that I don't think any other person, anyone but a really nosy little girl could have done. And that piece,
that's what brings them both to life so well, and I think makes them like instantly endearing, right? So you have this crotchety old woman and this really persistent little girl, and like their interactions together, to me, just it makes me smile the minute you start talking about them. It's just so endearing, and really you could just picture right away, like they both just come to life right away through their interactions. I think it's brilliant.
I'm so glad. And that really, I think that the one bit of, if we call it wisdom, or the one sort of revelation that came to me throughout the book after having written it, because as I said, I don't really know up front where I'm going, but was about community and the way that, she didn't have community. And this persistent, determined little girl who won't, because children are different, like other people might try their luck with someone, and if they seem to be getting the, I'm not interested, most adults will go, right, they're not interested, but not children. And it's a small coincidence that I have a very determined little girl living in my house who was 7 when I wrote this, whose name is Clementine. And I saw the way that she interacted with the people at the old people's home where my great auntie Gwen lived, and the effect that it had on the people that lived there. The nurses used to report that when I had been in there with Clementine, who was 3 at the time when we used to go, the nurses always said, we can tell when Clementine's been here, because even the non-verbal people who were there, who have dementia, even the people who really are not, hugely interactive, you can tell. You just walk in and there's this light, fresh kind of feeling in the room. And I think there is something magic about children and elderly and that generational thing, which is so important for the fabric of our society.
Yeah, I agree. I love it.
Thank you. Mabel's father.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to tell us a little bit about him without, giving anything away? But,
Yeah, I have to say up front that, because my mum said I had to, that's not my dad. My dad is very lovely. Mum said literally,
scroll that across the bottom. My dad is lovely.
This is not about my dad. And when I left, Mum called me before, right before I got on the plane, and she said, just make sure at each of your events you say, I have a lovely relationship with my father. But my dad didn't say that. He doesn't care. But my mum is very strong on that. Yeah. So look, I think that the other thing that always fascinates us, the relationship that we have with our parent, or the absence of a parent in the cases that, people lose a parent, are so formative on children. I mean, really anything that happens to a child during those formative years when their brain is plastic, it affects what happens to them for the rest of their lives. And I really wanted to explore that idea that having a supportive family, a loving family, it's another means of privilege, isn't it? Like, it's, you can talk about money or socioeconomic group, but having a family that loves you and supports you, it's probably one of the top things that will decide whether you are a success, and have a happy life or not. And that's something that has come up in previous books of mine too. I'm really interested in it. And in Mabel's case, she has a father who dominates the whole house. She does have a mother who loves her, but she's kind of stepped on as well by this father figure. And so she's kind of forced as a really little girl to find her own support network and to find a friend who she can rely on for everything. And she also has, later in the book, the characters of Cess and Ness are really important. And Cess is her mum's sister, who comes and looks after her, and then her aunt's friend, Ness. And they become these two people. And that also, we see that even kids who haven't had a strong parental, guiding figure, if they have got another adult who's able to step in and fill that void, then there's every chance that they can go on and have a successful life. So I hope that the book isn't there are some things that are fairly hard that Mabel goes through in her life, because, as I said, it's very hard to find someone who does something terrible when they're a child that hasn't had hard things happen to them. But I also hope that there are some uplifting lessons about, how much someone stepping into your life can make a difference, whether it's a little girl when you're 80 or an aunt when you're 15. These people are what make or break our lives.
Yeah. And I think you balance it really well with, there are some tough subjects in the book, but it's so funny and she's so snarky and their relationship is so sweet with her, younger neighbor. So it's just, I think you did it really well. Yeah.
I hope so. Someone said in my Australian tour, Sally Hepworth writes funny, heartwarming stories about murder.
I love that. Put that on your cover.
I know. I was like, that. I have to remember that. Maybe it will appear on the next cover. But I thought, good. That's kind of, without having verbalized it that way, that was what I was going for.
Yeah.
Right. You're a heartwarming murder. See, that's how next time we ask you
heartwarming murder.
How do you kill with humor and heart? How's that?
So this has a dual timeline, 1950s and present day. And so you've really created these two worlds that Mabel has stepped in and out of. how did you do that and still you kept us flipping the pages for each storyline? Tell us how you did that. Did you tackle them one at a time or flip back and forth as you wrote?
No, I did them chronologically, more or less. Like I always do a lot of drafts, so there is a bit of jumping around, but I always draft in chronological order because it gives me an internal sense of pacing and when we need the wool to be pulled over our eyes or the rug to be pulled out from under us. The 1950s segments were created with a lot of help from my mum, which was a really lovely part of it. She grew up in the neighbourhood, not living in Mabel's very grand house, in a fairly ordinary house, but in that neighbourhood. And her brother, my uncle, had actually written a book of short stories. It wasn't published, but about their childhood growing up, and a few of those stories about little tiny things like they lived in a cul-de-sac and they used to have races over the back fence, and the winner would get a Mix Master milkshake from one of the mothers. And I love those little kind of incidental, right, to the plot, but also just kind of creates the fabric of the world that you're creating.
I love that.
The house that they lived in is a real house. My mum did not grow up there, but it was a really lovely connection. My mum is an English teacher, was an English teacher. She's retired now and she has Parkinson's. So she is not very physically mobile, but her mind is there. And we have had such beautiful times together. She was always there at the end of the phone when I would say, Mum, what would be something you'd make a milkshake with? Oh, that's a Mix Master. Or what? And she really, what would be a song that they would be listening to? So I really,
that's a great bonding experience too between you and your mom, right?
Was. And when I did an event in country Victoria in Australia, there was a woman there and she put up her hand and she said, I am 81 years old and I thought you were going to be a lot older because the way that you depicted Mabel's life growing up and was just exactly right. And I thought, yes. And I said, that was my mum.
I was going to say, thank you, Mom.
What a great story. That's amazing.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so I don't want to give spoilers. This is a non-spoiler episode, but the ending was perfection. And you were talking before about wisdom in this novel, and I thought the real wisdom was in how you wrap things up. But so without giving anything away, how much did you know about the ending before you started? Like, were you heading that way the whole time you were writing, or was that like a brilliant stroke of genius as you were banging your head against the wall, or what?
Well, I didn't even know. So I knew that the book was going to be about friendship. That came to me very early on. And I was talking about, what happens to children and murder and all of those things. But I should say that this book came on the heels of a very difficult, my own divorce, which was a really, we all have terrible things in our lives. That was really a terrible time for me and a time that I really relied on my girlfriends. And I'm so lucky to have had this amazing group of girlfriends since I was about 10 years old. And so I was really reflecting on, what do you do when you're going through something difficult and you don't have a friend? Or, is there always going to be one? We need our friends, This is when we need them, when we're going through difficult things. So I started off the book knowing that it was going to be about friendship and knowing the kind of things that I thought were going to happen to her. And it was about halfway through, because I'm always searching. Someone said to me a few years ago, you always write a book with a big twist. Are you scared that you're going to run out of twists?
And you're like, I am now.
Now I am, Larry. Thanks a lot. And so I got about halfway through. As I said, I do a few drafts and I was thinking about, I don't think that books can and should hinge on a twist, right? Like I knew that I wanted it to be really about Mabel and who she was. And and about friendship and all of these things. But you also always hope that you can have a twist that's not just a moment, but it's actually resonant to the rest of the book. So I was allowing lots of ideas in. And so when that idea came, it was kind of like, I'm going to try for that. Let's see if it works. Because you know what it's like, guys. Like when we think we've got some bloody genius idea and then we get to the end and we're like, oh, that's weak. That's not going to work. Look, that was going to be genius. It's not genius at all. So I didn't know. I hoped it would work. And then I had to do a fair bit of redrafting. And I didn't really know until I sent it to my editors, because, they can also come back and be like, bad idea. Back to the drawing board.
I thought it was brilliant.
I'm glad that worked out. And I think it did support what I was trying to do with the book. And
I agree. Yeah. Wisdom. Lots of it.
Great.
So good. So Killer Sally, you're giving away 2 copies of Mad Mabel to lucky US viewers. It doesn't matter where you're watching, but make sure that you drop a comment. We're going to ask a question here in just a moment. Make sure you shout out where you're from. And when you answer this question, what crime was Elsie, aka Mad Mabel, convicted of? And drop it in the comments and let us know.
There you go. Okay, and the Killers are big fans of independent booksellers and want to send them all the support. Sally has chosen M. Judson Booksellers in Greenville, South Carolina to highlight. Sally, tell us why you love M. Judson Booksellers so much.
They will always be my home bookstore in the US because 2 tours ago, we're going back maybe 3 years, I was in South Carolina at Greenville. My bank card stopped working. I had no money and I had to put a note on Instagram asking for cash so I could get to the event, asking if there were any of my readers. I was begging. I was a 40-something woman on Instagram begging my readers for cash. And I ended up, and I said, I'm good for it, I'm going to pay you back. A Hepworth pays her debts. And I did get some money from a reader. Like, the indignity of being an author honestly knows no bounds, does it?
Seriously.
I arrived at the event and it was a good story, right? I opened with the, Beryl just lent me the money to get here, thank goodness. And the bookstore owner at the end, she said, thank you so much. And she gave me an envelope and I thought it was a card, thank you for coming. And I'm still like the whole way through the event, I'm thinking, shit, how am I going to get to the next place? How am I going to work this out? And it was an envelope full of cash. She gave me cash. And so I've always felt like she was my mum and that is, my home bookstore from now on. And I went back the next year and I paid my debt. I mean, I paid before that because I transferred the money, but they'll always have a very special place in my heart.
I love it. That's such a great story. And they are a great bookstore.
Have you been there?
Yes, I have. I'm about 3 hours from Greenville, I guess, from here. So
it's kind of a pretty town as well.
It's very cool. Yeah.
That's such a great story. Okay, we'll be dropping the link in the comments so you can order Mad Mabel along with any other books on your wish list from M. Judson Booksellers. Oh, there you have it.
Yeah. All right. So obviously the Killers love to read, and we love it when you share what you're reading in our Facebook group, post pictures, write reviews, ask for recommendations, and give yours. Tonight, though, we want to know, Killer Sally, what are you reading?
Well, I've actually just finished, so I'm not still reading, but on the way from Australia to here, I listened to the audiobook of Yesteryear by Caro Claire. Oh, now I'm going to run out. Caro Claire something or other. But the book's called Yesteryear, and it's just out. It's her first novel, and she has written this book about a trad wife who is, on the social media. She's showing her, baking sourdough, and she's got 16, kids in linen, and it's all very beautiful and really promoting this, primitive, life of time gone by. And then she wakes up one day and she's gone back in time, like 100 years, and she's actually living the life of a trad wife where there's straw, mattresses instead of the beautiful mattresses, and the toilets outside, and, the clothes are all, haggard, and, there's no modern medicine, and she has a bit of an experience with it. It's so well written. It's, you'd never know that it was a debut. Not, obviously a lot of debuts are good, but the premise was just so fantastic. It really kept my attention, and it was dripping with wisdom and just makes you think about the things that, we all sort of fantasize, don't we, about things when they were simple and things when, the good old days, and then you realize some of the good old days actually weren't so good.
You're like, no warm water? Where's the toilet? No.
You know what?
So good.
Yeah.
I'm reading it right now. It's so good. I would like stayed up too late last night reading it. Yeah. It's so
Isn't
good.
it great? Yeah.
It's really good.
Highly
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah.
Fantastic book.
Yeah. Really clever. Really get it.
Well, speaking of fabulous books, we have 2 new releases we want to celebrate tonight. First, we have Too Close to Home by Serafina Nova Glass. The tranquil facade of an affluent lakeside neighborhood shatters after a car explodes at a community barbecue, and one woman there knows it was meant for her. So that looks fantastic. And we also have The Ending Writes Itself by Evelyn Clark, aka V.E. Schwab and Kat Clark. In The Ending Writes Itself, 6 struggling authors are invited to spend a weekend on the private Scottish island of a reclusive genius, only to discover a shocking secret. Arthur Fletch is dead, and his last book is unfinished. So Serafina is giving away 4 copies of Too Close to Home, and Evelyn Clark is giving away 5 copies of The Ending Writes Itself to US viewers. So you want in, make sure you tell us in the comments where you're from, and we will pick some winners. Good luck.
We should all go to a deserted island, shouldn't we? And just see what happens. And then it'll be like, who gets to write this book?
I think
As long as it's not yesteryear deserted island.
Yeah, right.
Very well resourced.
Can there be a nice resort there?
It has to be a resort. It can't be like, yeah. I'm not
in Mexico, Cabo.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll come find you. How's that?
Yeah.
Well, and because we are all about shamelessly plugging our own murdery fun, don't miss the Killer's latest reads.
That's right. Kara's got We Were Never Friends, a sorority reunion that takes a very, very dark turn.
And speaking of deadly parties, Heather's serving up the perfect hosts, an over-the-top gender reveal party that explodes in more ways than one.
And Kimberly's taking you on a deadly European getaway in the expat affair. 2 Americans, the glittering diamond trade, and danger in Amsterdam. And we want to say a big killer thanks to Book Reporter for sharing the murdery fun. Stay up to date on bookish news and events at bookreporter.com.
And Sally, it's that time. We are so happy to let you know that you have survived the Killer Author Club again.
Yay!
And you guys survived too, even though I haven't taken my estrogen. No, I have.
Right. We're just thinking since you're on vacation in Mexico, you took it. So that's good. We're all safe. And okay, so tell us where listeners and viewers can find you online.
Yes, come and follow along on Instagram. I'm about to head off on my US tour. Always there is a debacle where I can't find anywhere to stay and end up sleeping in a hotel room with a strange middle-aged man and woman. You'll find out more about that if you follow me, or my bank card stopped working. It's just always a glorious disaster. So that's at Sally Hepworth. SallyHepworthAuthor.com is my website. And they're probably the 2 best that you can see all of the events that I'm doing across the state starting next week. So I'd love to see anyone who wants to come along and come to one of my events.
Exciting. Yeah, your Instagram is a lot of fun, so definitely follow her there. Okay, you guys, that's a wrap on tonight's episode. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will be back in 2 weeks on April 28th with Allison Wynn Scotch, talking all things The Insomniacs. Until then, you can catch us wasting way too much time on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, where you should be subscribing to our channel. For links, upcoming schedule, past episodes, and merch, head to killerauthorclub.com. Thanks for being part of the club. Good night.
That does it for tonight's show. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to catch our next show live, we're every other Tuesday night on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For times, upcoming schedule, and to catch up on past episodes, visit us at killerauthorclub.com. Happy reading. Now get on out there and kill that TBR.